So the MCU came through with an overindulging series for a character and story that is supposed to represent a minority group and even a religion, and it had some quite interesting and fun elements in it, but at the same time it fell off when it came to the main aspects of introducing a superhero origin story, like character development and plot sequences. What up peeps, and welcome back to a new review video. This time we're looking into Miss Marvel series. We could all definitely notice a huge change in the direction that Marvel has been taking since Avengers Endgame, and recently it's been a hit and miss, especially for their recent shows. One thing we can all observe for sure is that they are doubling down on the comedy. As I mentioned in my Shang-Chi movie review, Marvel keeps forcing a lot of their comedic scenes and jokes to the point that those jokes fall flat eventually and don't sound genuine, and this show is surely guilty of that. The other thing about this show is that it focused too much on representation than the development of Miss Marvel the superhero, and we will delve into the details of that in this video. So before we jump into it, a warning first that this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen this one yet, you know what to expect.
I'm a superhero.
Miss Marvel is another origin story that brings a new perspective and culture into Hollywood and the superhero genre, much like Black Panther and Shang-Chi, with Miss Marvel or Kamala Khan's origins being from Pakistan and at the same time from a Muslim background. Now when it comes to the origins of Kamala Khan, in the first couple of episodes, the show indulges very much into her world and surroundings, from family, friends, lifestyle, religion, culture and customs, to the point that it even gets into the nuances and tiny details of the traditional society and its day-to-day life. Now I did enjoy some of these elements and their scenes, and was laughing at a few of the references and jokes as well, like the gossiping Illuminantes and the different gangs in the Eid festival. And as someone who comes from a very similar background, some of these aspects are very real. And I also liked some of the costumes that were included because I could resonate with them too. To some extent, it was good for the show to highlight these aspects and introduce the world to a new cultural perspective. But on the other hand, I thought it delved a little too much into that, and also presented a lot of these elements in a very comedic way, which sometimes seemed a bit unnecessary, bizarre, and even silly in a few of them. And that overfocus on these elements took a toll on the progression of the story of Miss Marvel as a superhero. It made the Miss Marvel origin story seem neglected and kind of shoved in the middle whenever the show went too far and kind of forgotten it was actually a superhero origin story. Even the way she gets her superpowers wasn't because of a huge challenge that she had to face or a difficulty that she needed to overcome. She is simply a huge fan of Captain Marvel, and the only issue she's facing is that she's the brown girl who can't really become a superhero in the society that she lives in. And that is not a compelling reason for why or how someone becomes a superhero. Being a superhero requires sacrifice, huge changes to one's personality, and most of all, that person never sees themselves as a victim, which is what Kamala does here. Of all the superhero origin stories we have seen so far, none of their characters have ever complained about whatever predicament they were facing. And one of the best examples of this is Captain America, who was literally born with a rare condition that made him physically delicate and weak, but his perseverance and strong will, which the people around him have noticed, is what got him the chance to be more than what he wanted and worked for. And the same thing with Iron Man. Being kidnapped by a terrorist group and threatened with death is what got him to exude such a strong will to live and make a drastic change to himself until he managed to free himself and change the world around him. And it's the same thing with all the other superheroes we've seen in Marvel so far. Even if they weren't intending on having superpowers and their life changed accidentally, they never saw themselves as victims, but kept going to see how they can use what they got for their own good and the good of everyone around them. But Kamala here is presented like a sad little child who admires a superhero and sees herself as a victim in a society that only looks at her differently, and therefore she gets her superpowers so easily.
Do you want to be a superhero?
Yes.
That is not a good message to send when you talk about a character that is supposed to make a difference in the world, whether it's a fictional or realistic world. Now after the third episode, the show keeps on with Kamala's journey to discover her origins as she traces it back through her bloodline. It was interesting to use the concept of Jinn as the villains, but I couldn't understand completely what their role was, as it wasn't explained that much. Also showing that Kamala is actually a Jinn was only mentioned a few times, but there was no explanation to what makes her a Jinn in a family of humans. Which brings me to the next point as well, where the show didn't explore much into the villains or the clandestines and why they are after the bangle. They just kept talking about going home and that's it. Even Najma's motivations weren't completely explained and the show kind of brushed through it quickly. And this is the issue I was talking about earlier. The show dedicated most of its time into delving more into cultural and religious traditions and didn't leave time for the superhero story itself to develop properly. The character arc of Miss Marvel is developed too quickly. The villain's motivations and origins aren't explained fully, and the show overall kind of seemed like a teenage comedy drama about a Muslim girl in particular, with the superhero element pushed to the side as a secondary plot. And as the story progressed in later episodes, it seemed like the action sequences were just put in the middle randomly as well. It made made me think that the producers were continuing for too long with expositions and the drama and comedy scenes that at some point they thought, oh wait, this is a superhero series. Okay, let's put an action scene here quick.
Am I a red dagger now?
It suits you.
Surprise.
It just felt odd in the way they included these scenes in a few of these episodes. Now the CGI and practical effects overall were not that bad. The fight scenes however were not very engaging, because there were lots of cuts and edits and close shots where you can barely see what is happening sometimes. And in the last episode, the show doesn't really show a villain to be defeated or a significant challenge for Kamala at least. It just becomes a rescue mission with a few fight scenes between Kamala and Kamran, until she's eventually able to help him escape out of America. And to be honest, it wasn't a very satisfying end, and I felt that there could have been more episodes to introduce a more serious challenge for her. Overall, I can't say I disliked this series, and I did enjoy quite a few elements in it, but it made me forget sometimes that I was watching a superhero origin story, with all the drama, comedy and sequence of the story, and how it focused more on Kamala as a regular person and her community, rather than on her becoming Miss Marvel. So for my final score, I would give it 5.5 out of 10. It was a little above average and it could have been better. So let me know, what did y'all think of it in general, and what parts drew you more or made you dislike it? And if you are someone from a similar background to the characters here or not, what did you think of the representation aspect, and do you agree that it was overdone or was it made to a reasonable level? Share your opinions in the comments below, and I would very much like to read what you have to say about it. And until I see y'all in the next video, thank you very much for watching, have a splendid day, and peace out.